product that would be analyzed and we would understand the concentration, and so that we could standardize the dose that every woman was getting. So I'll skip a bunch of steps here, but Gina helped us with that. We chose something that would be reasonable we chose a dose. We wanted a dose that would be a reasonable dose in a user's normal life.
So in like common terms, it's about a bowl. We figured that out. Like it's basically what I'll dose with every morning. So it's a very small amount.
Yeah, Gina was absolutely critical in that, and that's what it was. In the end, it was presidential Kush, and we had the analytics of the product.
And can I interject one more time? This was revolutionary, I would say. We never had any kind of study with cannabis and lactation that actually controlled the cannabis, which was a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Right, and to do a pharmacokinetic study in the breast milk, you have to know the dose, and you have to control the timing. So that was critical, and then we needed a dose that would give the woman the effect that she's looking for, and also that we would be able to measure with our mass spec. So that was tricky, but Gina was very helpful with that. So then the other part of it was, once we figured out the dose, and we our job is to study pharmacokinetics in breast milk, so we just looked at old data, a lot of Dr. Custis's data and serum levels, and just thought about what it should do in breast milk if it's going to follow normal pharmacokinetics. So we knew kind of what we were looking at. And then we had to think about consent and how these women were going to consent without us having to report, because that would have been the end of the study if they were going to have to be reported, right?
That's right.
So what we did was the IRB, we worked real close with the IRB, and the IRB said you can do something similar to what they did during HIV studies. And it's you waive the documentation of the consent. So the woman consents. She reads the consent, she consents by participating, but you waive documentation of consent in order to protect the woman. And so we got through the IRB finally. That was painful, as you can imagine. And then we found two real things. So here was I'll say the most disappointing part of the study, and then I'll say the best part of the study. The most disappointing part of the study was we came up here and talked to Gina and her crew and the Elephant Circle, and we had, twice Dr. Huff and I came up, and there were 200 women in there, lactation consultants, saying, we'll recruit for this study in 30 days. You'll have 50 samples. It didn't happen that way.
And it was so hard.
It was so hard, and I think that we learned a few things. One thing was the woman had to show a lot of volition. She had to go to a community center that was unmonitored, or she could send somebody to pick up the package that had all the stuff in it, the bottles, and the brand new glass pipe, and the consent, and the instructions. Then she had to go to a pre-specified cannabis dispensary and pick what we chose, that we had gone up there and watched them measure it and weigh it, and we knew what we were getting. So it was 2 stops. That was a problem, I think. We also did not buy the marijuana. That was part of, our IRB felt like if she was willing to buy it and consume it herself, that showed a lot of consent in and of itself. And then here was the big one. We asked women to abstain from all cannabis products for 24 hours prior to initiating the study. And the feedback we got, and I'd love for Gina to chime in here, was that that's tough. And especially in a woman who's using it medicinally. As a matter of fact, our IRB, and we kind of talked about this, whether it would be an ethical decision for somebody that is using it medicinally to abstain from their medicine for 24 hours. So in the end, we think that was a huge roadblock for them. Please.
Did you get a baseline before the 21, 2, and 4?
Yeah, you want to see it? Let's see. All right, so there were inclusion. We'll just skip to the good stuff. How's that?
No, I want to see the methodology.
Okay, well, here's your baseline. I'll go back for whoever wants to see the methodology. But here was time 0 was at 24 hours having abstained from everything that they would pump. That's time 0. That was our first level. Then she was asked to smoke her allotted dose at her own rate, but quickly. And
The
Well,
0.1
Gina-
of a gram.
Yeah, Gina said it would be 3 or 4 hits. No?
Yeah, it's not much.
Real quick.
You could probably power puff it with one good hit, depending on what kind of consumer you are.
And we matched this with Eustis's work because she had done so much work about inhalation rates and how most of it is absorbed within 20 minutes, and the peak plasma rate is going to be really quick before they even quit taking the medicine. So we knew we had to get a quick sample,
Which is similar to cigarettes, by the way.
Uh-huh. So we asked her to smoke and then take a 20-minute sample to pump her breast for 20 minutes. Combine it. That's time point 1. Then at 1 hour, 2 hour, and 4 hour. And then she, at each time frame, she would just mix her milk and freeze it. Mix her milk and freeze it. Mix her milk and freeze it. And then so both breasts. The whole milk, because the hind milk is different than the fore milk, and there's a lot of fat in the hind milk, and we were worried that if we didn't get the whole, I could go on and on. But anyway, basically, the end of the story is it matched what the pharmacokinetics should have done. And this is exactly what we found. We had one kind of outlier, and I could show you that. Here she is. So when you read our paper, they made us throw out number 6 because we had a few no samples. But number, let me find it. The Cmax is 148. Here, 420. Okay, so number 7 was probably a chronic user. That's our best assumption. We don't know that, and they told us how much they usually used, and she did not send her sheet in. But whatever, I'm proud of her for sending some milk. So anyway, we stood on our heads till we, 10 months into this, said, oh my gosh, we came back up and tried to rally the troops, and we were going to get it done. And 10 months later, we had nine women. And we thought, I mean, I can't tell you, every day in the Infant Risk Center, it is 2 or 3 calls a day. What are you doing about marijuana? What should our hospital policy be about marijuana and nursing? And when we talked to women in Colorado, here's what we heard. We heard either they take the babies, totally take the babies, or they ban them from nursing in the hospital. There's even just residual if they're not acutely high, but there's some in their urine or metabolites in their urine that they were unallowed to nurse at all. Or the third thing was don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
And so women were hospital shopping, trying to figure out what's going to happen to them when they access care. And then if they get out of the hospital with their baby, what happened in the legal system was even a bigger mess. So I was like, oh my God. So we thought it had been so hard and it had already been 10 months, we ought to just push forward with the publishing the paper. And thankfully the Green Journal was really, the editor of the Green Journal, Nancy Cheshire, she's in North Carolina, and she did a podcast about this study, and she was really complimentary, and I was real happy to hear it. And what she complimented most was the women that participated. She said, this is dangerous territory they're in, and that they were willing to participate is helpful because some data is better than no data, and at least we can do something with counseling in this. Could we say to somebody, if you occasionally use, can you abstain for 24 hours and be safe to nurse? I think we could probably say that. I mean, all 9 of them had a level of almost 0. The only one that did not get to 0 at time 0 was that number 7. Could we say, if you're going to use, here's how, as Gina was saying, how can I do this responsibly? If I'm going to use, we don't take babies from moms who drink alcohol. And they probably do that while they're nursing, especially if they nurse a year or 2. So we need to kind of regroup here. And you'll never hear anybody from the Infant Risk Center, as Gina said, say, please, smoke while you nurse. I mean, no, we're never going to say that. We do not agree with that. But we also think we need some numbers. We need some medicine. We need some science to be able to say anything about the transfer into breast milk and what that might be doing to the baby.
So we didn't see the methods,
You
but
wanna go back?
in smoking, was this vape?
Okay, so the huge discussion about this, It was a learning curve for Dr. Hale and I were like on the exponential learning curve. But it was put in a bowl. Am I saying something funny?
No, you're fine.
Okay. It's 1/10 of a gram put in a bowl, and they had to smoke it as, like she said, quickly. You know, we wanted them to
So
inhale
you're
it.
using combustion.
Yes, yes.
And with that being said, out of the 250 respondents for our breastfeeding or Canada lactation survey, 72% prefer to smoke. It's what works best. They have the
Combustion
easiest.
versus vape.
Yeah.
Vape, you know, they're both smoking.
This was
Right.
a huge issue. And what we couldn't figure out was how to, the vapes, I mean, we could have bought vapes, but I mentioned that this was Dr. Teresa Baker and Tom Hale funding this study. So, you know, it was at some point some kind of cost containment. And we didn't know, you know, should we buy brand new vapes? Because how do you make sure it's a clean vape with no old product in it? And then, you know, as you're saying, control the inhalation. And it's another option. It would have been another option. It was a much more complicated option in our thoughts.
Believe me, I appreciate everything you're saying because I'm myself doing multiple studies and going through this trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's really, it was, I'm glad we did it. Even now, after all the, I mean, we've gone through it here. Two people from Colorado called our IRB and threatened to turn our IRB supervisor in. They wanted to see the methods on the paper, and because they didn't like the consent process. I thought it was really interesting. Thankfully, Kathy worked on the HIV product and or the projects, and she was very well versed. And I really believe that we did this correctly.
I have a question for you. So I've had all my kids. I'm not going to have any more, but I'm just.
Be careful. You never know.
Well, sometimes it's scientifically impossible. My question is, so there's some stuff, and it's all like, you know, coming across. I'm looking at my phones, I'm looking at a website here, where they're talking about cannabinoids and trace amounts of THC that occur in breast milk naturally, like without smoking.
Okay.
And so that those cannabinoids trigger
Endocannabinoids.
It's impossible for phytocannabinoids to be in our bodies.
Phyto.
They come from the cannabis plant. So when you read or see, they don't know what they're talking about. We don't have phytocannabinoids in our breast milk. It's one of the most prolific, like, it's constantly it's just a bad myth.
I'm just like, I'm just looking at a couple names here. I want to Google them and find the studies and stuff. They're talking about the European Journal of Medicine, where they're talking about they're finding these, like, not the, these unknown CBDs and trace amounts of THC actually naturally occurring in breast milk, and that it's what triggers the feeding mechanisms.
Okay,
for young
so
children.
you definitely, whoever's writing that is definitely a little confused because what they're talking about is endocannabinoids. So here's our mass spec, and this is delta-9 THC, and we saw these little spikes and we were like, what the heck is that? And that's our naturally occurring endocannabinoids that do regulate feed, nausea, pleasure. It's probably why when you throw up you feel better. That's probably endocannabinoids. It may be why after a baby nurses and receives endocannabinoids in the breast milk, they're totally lax.
Milk drunk.
And yeah, for sure, the spike isn't an isomer.
Well, we're looking at it.
Because
This
I
is
don't
tricky.
see that as a,
This has been so fascinating. This is, to be honest with you, Dr. Hale and I want to do more studies with these women. We want to do serum levels. We want to do repeat dosing. That's going to be extremely important. We want to do chronic users. We want to do oral intake. We want to do all these.
I
But
don't think you want to do oral intake. You want to minimize between patient variable and optimize pharmacokinetics, those parameters. So
oral,
you have to
mother
go
oral.
buccal or sublingual,
Oh, I follow.
okay?
I follow.
So let's avoid first pass.
Yeah.
Let's avoid all of
Okay,
those.
but
Well,
what do
except
we-
you need to ask that question.
What do we do with
Right.
all the moms that are saying they use it orally?
Yeah.
I mean, that, we have no
If you-
information for.
If you want to dose them and control more variables,
Yeah.
you're
And
gonna
I
have
hear
to
what
go
you're,
that route.
I hear what you're saying, and that's exactly what Nancy Cheshire said. She said they asked one question. Does volatilized THC transfer into breast milk, and at what rate? And you're absolutely right, if we can control some of those variables. But anyway, back to the other part of the story, endocannabinoids have become like a rock star in our world, because think about all that could control in the infant, and we didn't know they were in breast milk until we did this study, and we were like, well, what's in there, and at what concentrations? Does it change over time? And is it different for a preemie mom, and is it different for a colicky mom? And we have all these ideas about endocannabinoids, but what he just said, I have no idea, but you must be well versed in this, who you are, but endocannabinoids are very hard to study. They're extremely unstable, and you can't, if you leave milk out, it almost doubles or triples within an hour. The endocannabinoids, probably bacterial, we're working on that. But that's been a real tricky thing.
What's your thought behind why it doubles, triples?
Bacteria, it's lifestyle. Probably. Do you have other thoughts?
No.
No.
Were you able to back calculate on the dose to see what percentage went into the breast milk?
Okay, so this is where you're gonna say she's doing funny math up there. But we do this with other drugs in breast milk, and we calculate something called a relevant infant dose. And it's basically the mom's dose over the baby's dose, and you get a percentage. And yes, we calculated 2.5% of the mom's dose entered the milk. So,
That's C-max.
no, that's not CMAX.
That's total.
That's area under the curve.
AUC?
Yeah, there you
That's
go.
kind
Yeah.
of
Okay.
Was the do you have a image of the mass spectrograph of time zero?
I don't know if I put it in here or not. Oh,
I'm interested
gosh.
if that secondary peak is
Picked up in the
yes,
time zero. Oh, bugger.
or if it's consistent in ratio with.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying, and I'm sorry I didn't include it. We have it. Is it on this table? What is time zero? So, I think what you're asking is variation. If we run it 3 times, do we get? Is that what you're asking me? Coefficient of variation.
Well, because the curve or the peak that you had that was blue
Yeah.
seemed like a peak of interest that you weren't.
That's just
Sure.
endocannabinoids.
So-
That's just Dr. Hale.
But for the endocannabinoids, that should be present in time zero.
Yes, it should. And that's a great question. That's a great question. But here's, we really goofed this up. This is totally hijacking your whole project.
No, you're
but,
fine. You're so
we
fine.
totally goofed this up because as soon as we saw endocannabinoids, we just looked at normal milk and they were there. And we said, run the CannaMama's milk. And they were like, double in the CannaMama's milk. And we thought, oh, we're onto something. But we had let all that milk sit out.
Okay.
So we got to do it again. But,
It's interesting that your RID, your patient number 7 really skews your average there.
It
I think
does.
you probably ought to
we
drop the high and low or something.
We almost did,
Yeah.
but our biggest problem in our study was the N.
Yeah, the power's low. Right.
So we thought we should put her in
Well, then
because,
just when you, I mean, if you've written it, just make it a little note, little footnote, look at this guy, you know?
yeah. Well, there's been a lot of discussion about her, I can
Yeah.
tell you that. And all the conversations we've had with all the people that have called to visit with us about, it's always about number 7. Who's number 7? What's she doing? And
Well, she's such an outlier
Yeah,
compared to the rest
she
of
is.
the group.
and you know, what the other criticism we got was, how did you know that they stuck to protocol?
Well,
And we don't. But what we can say is most of the curves were pretty tight.
yeah.
You know, except for her. And we decided to leave her in because what is she telling us? I don't know. Maybe she's telling us what a chronic user might look like. It's just food for thought.
It is, and it may not also be the chronic user, and maybe that she's, you know, genetically dissimilar from
Yeah.
the rest of the
I
group.
mean, there's
Yeah.
all kinds of
Yeah.
variables there.
Yep. But we need to do repeat dosing. We need to do chronic user.
And if you
Anyway.
get up to 200 ladies, you're gonna be able to do a subgroup analysis, and you can look at what
Yes.
7 in her cohort
That'll
look
take her
like.
10 years to do that.
Well,
Yeah, they
not
promised
Colorado News
50
policy
samples
understood,
in
right?
like 1 month, and then 10 months later we have 8 samples. But
Listen, I'm
anyway,
not criticizing you.
Yeah, it was hard.
it was, and she was very helpful.
And the problem is really why a lot of this matters besides the health of the baby is Child Protective Services. We are in a really, really difficult climate. I've had, since I came out of the closet, wrote my article, they've just been on my ass, just to put it very, very bluntly. I've had 3 investigations in as many years, I think. Something like that. And in 2 different counties. So this is an illegal state. So you can only imagine the fear that women are facing everywhere. And just to put some numbers behind it, I'm going to pull up some of the responses about the fear.
The other, Dr. Thompson is a PhD in Elm Circle, and her colleague is Indra Lucero, who's a lawyer.
And Dr. Thompson was supposed to be here today, but unfortunately she had a client and she couldn't make it.
And they, I don't know what their actual, they say they support women in vulnerable issues, and marijuana is one of them. But we had Indra look through our complete process, because in order to gain trust with this group and ever do studies, they've got to believe we're going to protect them. And so that was a huge barrier, but hopefully we've gained some trust now. I don't know.
I believe so. With me. So here's some of the numbers that we have out of the 252 respondents. We have 81% feared their healthcare provider would report their cannabis use to the government. And this is just for breastfeeding. I have a whole nother one about pregnancy. And whether these answers completely, women's health are dependent on these answers. They're lying to their providers. I consult with women all the time, and I tell them, lie, because it's a better option than having the government investigating your family and possibly taking your child away. We have 100% of the same women who are afraid their children are going to be taken away from them for using cannabis as medicine. 100% do not believe cannabis is harmful to their nurslings. Do they believe their nursling received THC? 44.1%, maybe. 42.2%, no. 13.7%, yes. So that it shows we don't know. People have no clue really what is the truth, and they're just making the best decision that they can based on anecdotal evidence. And so based on that alone, I can keep going. But what was that?
I honestly believe, talking to these mothers, I honestly believe they want what's best for their children.
True.
And I think if they just knew, okay, if I abstain for 24 hours, the levels are going to be near 0, and the benefits of breastfeeding are there. I have to believe they're going to make the best decision. And you and I both understand addiction and how hard it is for them to go with that, especially if they're using it medicinally, but it's at least a step.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with alcohol, there's this whole, just, pump and dump, get that, you got drunk, so get that out of your system, and then you can nurse. And it's really important that this kind of information comes out to women, because what it's sort of looking like, to me anyway, is that after 4 hours, it's dropping down fairly negligible. Maybe don't do it within the first hour of smoking. Don't
In a infrequent
infrequent
I think I would agree with everything you said if you add that statement.
How did you define infrequent? I missed the beginning, so.
No problem. We didn't really. All we really did was ask her what she was using.
Okay, kind of self-identification.
Yeah,
then.
and then we asked her to abstain for 24 hours.
That's not infrequent, though. I mean, using
So
2
most
or 3
of
times a week.
Houston's studies.
That's gonna depend on who you're talking to.
Right.
I mean, I'm a medical user and I medicate probably 3 or 4 times a day.
Yeah,
And
I
that's a
consumed
chronic
before I
user in
came.
my research, is
Most-
if you're using on a near daily basis, this is how we define chronic use. in
Yeah,
most
most of Houston's says if not daily,
near daily.
that's an infrequent user. So
Okay.
you're right.
That's
That's
interesting.
That more than by variation.
Yeah,
Was-
yeah, absolutely.
Was the same strain presidential Kush used for all the
Yes.
Yes.
the tests?
The exact same, and we had the analytics on it. We had the, in fact,
This
we
is like
called
the
the
first
guy,
time ever.
we called the gentleman who ran it on his mass spec. We had our PhD talk to his PhD, make sure everything was kosher. I mean, it's in the paper that it's interesting.
Was that 100 milligrams of presidential Kush sufficient for your like medication for you? Like
100 milligrams. So how
It's
many-
a
let's say
10th of a gram.
Oh, the 10th of a gram. No, just for the first bowl of the day, yes. But I medicate regularly throughout the day, so I would be a chronic user. They'd want to test someone like me
Yeah.
for my breast milk.
How are you able to test cannabis from a dispensary? Because the federal government has indicated to researchers at our university that we are not allowed, and I'm in a legal state, we are not allowed to purchase and test any cannabis
They
didn't
unless it comes
purchase.
from NIDA.
We didn't. The industry did.
Right.
But you selected it, which I thought was weird.
Well,
Well, that doesn't involve
they're doing that, I mean,
crossing
yeah, it's
Well,
just
that's
the
one of the
actual.
ways
There is
to
some
get
trust
around.
there because we're not in charge of those analytics. But we did call them and they're using, HPLC mass spec. We looked at their work. We talked to PhD. We tried, you're absolutely right. If we did it in a legalized state, we'd probably have to use NIDA or whatever.
You don't have to use NIDA if you want to step around it, and you can use the federal government's definition of how they keep their police, undercover, whoever, when they're engaging in a felony, to stay out of jail. So, UCI's Center for the Study of Cannabis is going to run studies outside of, within the UC system, but they will use industry in order to provide the material, real life material. That's been analyzed and legally, accessed, in doses and every route of administration, everything controlled, but they don't control that product getting into the patient. They control the analysis following administration.
Everything you're saying is very tricky, and we had these conversations ad nauseum with the IRB and others at the university trying to figure out if this was legal for us to do and to trust industry's
Yeah.
evaluation of the product. And all I can say is we are in full disclosure here.
Right.
No, that makes good sense. No, thank you. I appreciate that. Part of it is I'm just trying to figure out legal loopholes, so thank you.
People have called us asking, how'd you get it done?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
this
We're all,
is tricky.
trying to do this sort of controlled naturalistic research is where we have to move in order to progress the science, and
It is.
I'm trying to push that myself, so I'm interested in
Yeah.
how
They
you do it.
won't
It's not a
participate
criticism in
if-
any way.
if-
This is good.
I hope
Appreciate it.
I mean, I'm with a marijuana infused product manufacturer, and we'll ask people if they want it, and they can't even take it from us.
No.
A lot of the time.
No,
Even
not
if you
researchers.
gift it to
Okay,
them.
so we,
So
this,
interesting.
and this,
Strange
yeah,
place you get into.
and this
because
was
of
a
that.
big issue as well.
Yeah.
Could we purchase the product?
No,
And
No,
no.
you cannot.
no.
And so she had to purchase it.
Yeah.
And could she purchase it at, some flat rate that we could say, this is what it's gonna cost you? No.
No.
It has to be totally in your hands,
Mhm.
what you distribute. All you could promise us, the gentleman that was involved, all he could do was give us the analytics on the product and promise to set aside
Mhm.
pre-weighed doses.
That's
And,
not too bad.
yeah,
It was nice of them.
Why did you do this in Colorado?
because we live in Texas and we can road trip it.
No, okay, fair. That's perfectly reasonable. The reason I asked the question is that one could reverse engineer your end problem a little bit and say, which states are DSS less likely to go after these women? And
Right.
again, my reason for bringing this up is that I come from Massachusetts,
Uh-huh.
where I haven't had any experience with DSS in pregnancy specifically, but I've had a number of my adult patients interact with DSS, and so far, DSS has been pretty reasonable. And basically have asked me for documentation of their patient status and then have backed right off. which suggests to me that you might want to look at Massachusetts as a place to do some more stuff.
Yeah, Washington State called us. The lactation consulting groups called us and said, do your next study up here, we'll help.
Well, all right.
I said, we are banned. But no, I think you're right. And I think there are some states that this has matured a little bit and are more maybe engaged in the research of it, that it might be more open to these ideas. I don't know that for sure.
So under the new REC guidelines, which I find somewhat ironic since the REC guidelines, we've now established a number of specific research licenses that will be provided, so that there are now groups that will have the ability to do this sort of a study where they will be able to grow or purchase the cannabis, provide it to patients, et cetera, et cetera. I think that there's a fertile ground there for you to go ahead to the next step.
Yeah.
One thing that might help you if you're looking at Colorado, I just did, a couple years ago, I did some preliminary stuff with child welfare services that I never really took anywhere. But different counties within Colorado, so the states, they have like kind of guidelines, but they allow counties to choose if you're going to go a multi-track or like single track. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking at some of the more of the front range counties, especially like Denver and North, you're probably going to have better luck with county welfare services that aren't going to pursue those women because they look at use in conjunction with other risk factors rather than use itself being like the rubber stamp that we're going after your kids now.
Yeah.
So that may help as well.
Yeah.
So about a year ago, I testified with CPS before a special Senate committee, basically looking at that issue. They're wanting to change the state law to make it a little bit more uniform, especially with regard to THC, because they're realizing that it's clogging up their system unnecessarily, and we have real problems like opioid addiction.
Yeah.
You know, the number of babies born with opiates in their system in this county right here in Pueblo is not okay. I actually wanted to get some of the Pueblo nurses here. You can look up the information and it's all available. The studies done here in Pueblo on infants born with other drugs in the system is really, really scary. And we know that cannabis can help these moms get off the other drugs and bring their baby into the world on a drug that's not going to have them in the ICU for, who knows, or NICU, excuse me. But yeah, So are there any other questions? Like, I know we kind of sped through some stuff, but I didn't really talk about my background at all, if anyone cares. Like, I just want to be able to hit everything that anybody wants to know before the time is up.
Is anyone going to be doing like IQ testing on these kids?
We hope so someday.
On these children that are involved with this? No, we have no idea who they are.
What I meant is CannaBabies. We want our children to study it. I would be one of the first people to put my children up to be studied. My son, I breastfed for 15 months. Only 6 of those months did I not use cannabis while breastfeeding. I was pregnant with him. I did cannabis up until like my 35th week, from like week 7 or so. He's an honor student. He's going into his 8th grade year. He's been honors GT identified in the county of Denver since kindergarten. So, you know, he's band student, he, you know, plays football, like everything that you could think of, he's done it, been in Spanish, done science. He's just a really great kid. And I'm like, please, study my children. Yeah. You know, as my youngest is coming up acting the same way. And that's actually one of the other questions we asked the women who chose cannabis as a medicinal alternative. Number one, they chose it as a risk-benefit analysis. We saw that over and over, that they chose it instead of something else that they felt was more risky during lactation times or during pregnancy as well. But I did ask, sorry, I'm pulling it up. Do you believe your CannaBabies hit their developmental milestones as expected? 260 respondents, 93.4% said yes. Do you consider any of your CannaBabies advanced? 259 responses, 80.3% said yes. You know,
relative to what?
These are the opinions of the moms.
Yeah,
You know, these are just self-reporting and saying. But I think this is the other question, though. Do any of your children seem to have developmental delays? 92.7 said no. If so, do you attribute any of these delays to your choice to consume cannabis? 100% said no. I mean, no, this isn't scientific, but I think it matters. I think
That's science. I'm sorry, I'm a scientist. I teach research methods and statistics. That is science.
I agree.
I think what he's saying,
Different kinds of
I think what he's
Different kinds
saying,
of
and that's
Gina,
fair.
is that there's not a control.
There's
You
no
don't
control.
have a control group.
Yep.
And that's hard to base much, I mean, like the Generation R data certainly says that there's some worrisome areas, some executive function, memory, those types of areas that the amygdala could be affected by early exposure. I think we agree on that.
And that's where the risk-benefit analysis comes in. If you know what the possible risks are, you know what you need to use this medicine for, you know what the alternative risks are, because basically we have a lot of medications that are prescribed to women while pregnant and breastfeeding that we know have a detrimental effect on the children, and women take them anyway. So it's like, look at this medicine versus cannabis, and now decide which one we want to play the risk game with our children,
So, I mean, that I'm aware of, there's only been 2 studies that actually kind of do what you want. There's the OPP out of Ontario, 10 years ago or so, and I think another one was like in Montreal or Pennsylvania or something like that.
And then there's the big Danish.
The Danish one, yeah. I was thinking just within North America, US, Canada. But both of them basically showed the only effects that they could find statistical difference for in utero exposure, obviously it's not breast milk, was higher executive functioning in later childhood, so slightly higher prevalence of things like ADHD and hyperactivity, but those are also so heavily influenced by environmental factors that, even with that predisposition, if you're in a stable, supportive, comfortable home, that could very easily be overridden by the environment.
So I agree with everything you've just said, except that those studies, those big studies, we worked ad nauseum on these inclusion and exclusion criteria, because if you look at those studies, it is almost impossible to tease out marijuana use even from cigarette smoke use.
Yeah, because that was...
And is it tobacco? Is it other drugs? Is it environment?
Well,
Is
they
it
were trying to...
is
It
it
was
school?
self-identified, yeah.
Because the big one out of Jamaica said it didn't matter if she was smoking or not, it mattered if the kid went to school.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think this is so multifunctional that I think it's going to be very hard, except to just watch these kids. And like you said, do an IQ test of people and base it on controls that, saying...
Even that, you can't control the environment the child's going to grow up in, so there's so many confounding variables that IQ test is more or less moot.
But you can.
But you could cross-section. You could
Yeah,
cross-section.
economic and
You imagine,
education opportunities. It's not perfect, but it's sure better than saying, well, do you think your kid's smart?
Yeah.
Which is not the case.
No, I understand. I think, though, that it's not just do you think your kid's smart, it's who sees their children the most, right? And I know for a fact my kids are advanced. I know because the schools told me. I know because I was a nanny for years and years. I've been around lots of other children, and I can compare and know, hey, the pot smoke didn't do anything to my child, and if it did, how can you prove that it's this and not the fact that I live in Denver and the crap he breathes every single day? You know what I mean? I live in one of the worst neighborhoods in the Denver metro area. The condo that I stay at, I don't know what's in my walls and stuff. You know what I mean? These are the kinds of things that when we talk about is cannabis harming our children, there are so many factors that we believe it's a rights issue. Bottom line, it's the right of the mom to decide, what am I using it for? Is it necessary? And what is the risk? Is this a better risk than that risk? And that's where we leave it at that. It's not a medical issue. It is a political issue, a woman's rights issue.
We asked, one of the questions we asked, we were real curious about this with Gina and her group, is do you self-regulate when you're nursing? Do you already do this? Do you not nurse for a while after you've taken a hit until you feel the high? Do you do that? And basically, they said they were somewhat aware of that. I mean, that's what we teach them about alcohol. We say, okay, fine, for every drink, wait 2 hours. And pump and dump is crap. If it's in the serum, it's in the milk. If it's not in the milk, it's not like you dump and pump. Your body does that.
Sober up.
That's right, sober up. But what we're real curious about is those mothers, are they doing this already? And I think the answer to a great degree was yes.
I think that also a lot of these moms aren't feeling high. When you're a medicinal consumer, that's not what we're doing it for. So it's a completely different question. If I felt too high, I wouldn't want to take care of my kids anyways, let alone breastfeed, if that makes sense.
Just going back to the human, like the woman's rights issue, I mean, if there is not a science to back that this is harmful, if you can't show this is harmful, how can you take a child away? There's no proof it's harming them. You don't need proof, you know, that you don't have the proof to say this is something that is damaging. You're guessing that's damaging, and taking a child away from its mother is so much more damaging.
Well, we have evidence
And
of
we have
children.
evidence that's damaging.
We have evidence of children that have been removed for straight THC consumption of their parents and then sexually abused, murdered. So what's worth than death? You know what I mean?
But the other side of it is true as well, what you guys were saying earlier. As an OBGYN, I may write for 6 opioid prescriptions a day for women that are leaving the hospital after a C-section. I'm sending them home with medicine that so, you know, what's worse? And I'm not a policy writer. All I want to do is prove the science and then let people, we are not at all interested in criminalizing these moms, nor are we interested in saying it's fine to do it. What we want to do is give them the information and let them discern from
And this is, to your point about the political side of this is about informed consent.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
But the informed part of informed consent is that you have to be able to provide credible information on which to then make the decision. And
I agree.
Right.
I think hundreds of years of women using cannabis to control different issues is credible science, though. You know what I mean? We're not talking about something that's just been used by women recently. I mean, we know that up until the 40s, it was in the book. So, you know, as a way to treat all the pains.
Including pharmaceutical companies, like they developed thalidomide for nausea for women, and look what happened.
Yep,
right?
flippers.
Yeah.
So,
And
Are your CannaMamas using varied levels of THC
Oh,
in
yes.
there and CBDs, and
oh yes.
they're utilizing the product they feel most confident
Yep.
with for whatever it is that ails them?
We see that most people are smoking flower, but we see about half of the people are in legalized states, half aren't, about half still use or purchase underground. You know, even when they have dispensary availability, they're still going to their guy, you know, or their grower. I shouldn't say guy, there's plenty of female growers.
Is there a reason why they did anybody ask that, why they choose to go that route, to go?
I haven't yet. I haven't asked that. I know for me personally why I do. I trust the person I've always bought from forever. It's more convenient. I can just go to his house, chill, pick up a bag, smoke, go home. You know, I don't know. Dispensaries tax him.
Well, I know that my own personal, like, he loves his plants.
Yes.
He loves them.
Absolutely. They're his
He's just
babies.
like they're his babies.
Yep.
Yeah. His beautiful daughters, he goes in there, like.
I trust what they're growing it with, the chemical, all of that, yes.
plays music for them.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, he does.
So on the same note, what are both of your thoughts on the other side of cannabis, on the hemp side, and safety with pregnancy and lactation?
I'm sorry, I don't know enough about it.
I think hemp is fine. You know, hemp doesn't have THC, so it's a good alternative.
No,
but
it's
if you,
tiny amount.
right, well, yes, not enough to matter in the discussion of THC being a toxin to an infant, right? But you know, we talk about entourage effect, and a lot of people want that, so it might not be as helpful. Are we almost out of time? I thought I saw you.
4:21.
Okay, great.
We got time.
We just hit.
You know what, to get back to your statement, what would be really cool in my opinion, the beauty of the endocannabinoids is they don't have the psychological, the euphoria. And
they do. No, they do. I mean, no, that's a runner's high, is the endocannabinoid system kicking in.
Okay.
That's why it protects us against depression and anxiety. This is research
Okay,
my
so
house
what would you
does.
say endocannabinoids don't have that?
They kick in when we're stressed. Your endocannabinoid system is activated when you're stressed to make you feel better and to be able and it does have those effects. It's just like your endorphins, right? Kick in.
Okay, so
It's the
my
same idea.
point though is, what if we could harness that and get rid of the bad, the exogenous?
They're trying.
You know, I mean, that would be so beautiful.
They're trying.
But at higher doses of AEA, you probably see the same phenomenon, really, right? You'd have to study that
Yeah.
just as well.
I just had one more question.
Yeah.
When you were reading off the data, you said there was a lot of women that didn't think the THC would go into their milk.
That's
and
right.
So your study proved
Right.
that wrong. What do you do to educate those women now to know that it is getting into the milk?
Well, since I started 3 years ago, I've always said, assume that it does. Because if CPS comes and they want to test your kid and then you thought it didn't and it does, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So we always have taught women to assume that something's going through. Plus, we know that some people's children, when they were drug tested by CPS, they tested positive. So that was evidence enough for me that at some point, somewhere along the line, whether you're a chronic user or I don't know, Dr. Hale taught me during the first month of breastfeeding, it passes more easily. There's so many variables to say I would never feel comfortable saying 100% it doesn't transfer when I didn't know that. So now my mission is to make sure everyone knows it's a fact, it transfers, and what we know to be trace amounts.
And to that point, we don't know that this was only like, does the baby get it only in the breast milk, or does it get secondhand smoke and the breast milk?
Right.
This is going to be a so. Dr. Cheshire has said, how are we going to get the serum levels in the baby? That's what we want to know. Does it transfer because oral absorption is so different and whatever? And I said, that may be a harder study than what I can pull off, because I don't know how you seclude a baby and only expose it. I don't know if I'm going to talk a mom into being able to do
We
that.
had enough to get the blood from the mom.
Yeah, we'd love to do that. But again, then I'd know who she was. So it's going to take a different consent process. Maybe Massachusetts.
If there are mothers who are interested in this kind of research subject and participating in these studies, can they just seek you out, or?
They just have to Google infant risk. We take calls and like 6 million hits, all drugs. But we'd love to. We're going to do a survey soon about cannabis use in breastfeeding, but we're really working on designing these other studies now, trying to work around the university is a very conservative university. And I personally was sitting in the room with the chancellor and the president, and they thought it was kidding when I said, going to Colorado tomorrow, we're going to do some marijuana research, and they giggled. But then when it's come back out in that article, I called them back up, and I said, it's coming. And sure enough, the Board of Regents started calling. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes for us. But we're very excited about what we found. And we're really excited about the endocannabinoids. That could be really cool if we could show. I mean, think about that. Think about colicky babies. What the heck? Nobody knows anything. What's that? Maybe the endocannabinoid system is off. Or it's in breast milk. Just what's in breast milk, mother to mother? I don't know.
I know. Well, I was just going to say we have our own theories about endocannabinoid deficiency and how if the mom is suffering and baby could be suffering, how it could actually help.
With all the new research that's coming out, it's connecting endocannabinoid system problems with a slew of different mental disorders and different things like that. Like, just logically makes sense that there could be that connection. So,
if we ever figure out how to stabilize them in the milk, we'll write it under paper.
Great job.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for everybody for coming. And I'll be up here if anyone wants to talk to me, or Dr. Baker will be here for a little bit longer too. Yeah, absolutely.
so you're in Denver. You had like
No, so I own an online resource called CannaMama, and I do cannabis advocacy consulting, mostly working with women who choose cannabis breastfeeding, helping them navigate that choice, and then also deal with their family and friends, and their doctors and CPS.
Okay. Yeah, I just found this really interesting. I did a CPS in Marlborough County a couple of years ago that I never took anywhere, but it was like really interesting to kind of just get their view on it. Laramie's one of the more liberal counties in Colorado. Comparatively, well, even like I was talking to the deputy director for the county CPS, and she's like, "Oh, we've been doing training or programming or whatever for women that can't positive drugs, like since 2010. So like long before the other,